Thank you, everyone, for joining us. The title of today's webinar is Transition of Operations, Preparation for Business and Culture Changes. This is a follow-up to a very well-attended session at April's Southeastern Expo related to family-owned business succession programs. So we're offering, as a follow-up to that, a three-part webinar series on succession planning. Today's is the first in that series and is on the transition of operations. Future webinars are a legal governance and structure webinar on November 30th, and then an options for family-owned businesses, whether generational transitions or selling to a larger company, and that webinar is on December 16th. Registration for these webinars will run in the bobtail starting about 2 weeks in advance. Today, the presentations will run about 40 to 45 minutes with 15 minutes for questions. This isn't a traditional Zoom. It's a webinar just on the Zoom platform. So questions need to be submitted through the questions box and our presenters will answer them. So just a quick overview before I introduce our panelists for today. So whether transitioning your family business from one generation to the next, or preparing your company for an acquisition outside of the family, transition of operations requires being ready for the process. This webinar will highlight items to prepare prior to closing the deal, discuss the impact of various acquisition types like tuck-in versus standalone, and talk about how to prepare for the two cultures, whether that's two different generations of a family or two separate company cultures, to successfully make the changeover. Our presenters today are Jeff Brunner, Director at Seatain Associates, and Barrett Conway, Director at Seatain Associates. First, let me give you Jeff's background. Jeff has more than 30 years of leadership experience in the propane, distillates, and HVAC sectors. He's held senior level positions in operations, sales, and marketing for some of the industry's largest consolidators. His extensive experience in the entire acquisition process includes post-acquisition integration activities and comes from having been involved in more than 90 transactions throughout the Eastern United States. His career includes having served as the Director of Operations for Hop Energy during a decade of significant growth, which directly correlates to this webinar topic. And Barrett Conway is engaged in M&A activity, business value estimates, and transaction analysis, leading the firm's deal execution team. Barrett has more than 7 years of experience in the professional financial advisory space. He's a member of NPGA and as a member of NPGA, he was named to the propane industry's first inaugural class of the 30 Under 30 program. Prior to joining Seatain, he worked for 5 years as an associate in the wealth management practice of Hightower Advisors in Houston, Texas. So with that, I'm going to stop and turn it over to these fine gentlemen. And I believe Barrett is going to start. So Barrett, over to you.
Thanks for the introduction, Steve. Thank you to NPGA for hosting this webinar. It's great that we're able to do this and help business owners kind of talk through these steps. So really what we're going to touch on in these first couple of on this whole presentation is really 3 subjects. Is your house in order? Preparing your company for an acquisition outside of the family, and then preparing for the merging of the two cultures. So kicking it off, this transition of operations, is your house in order? Whether you're transitioning to the next generation or planning to sell the business to a strategic or financial buyer, I think one of the first things that you should really consider is a business valuation. And why do you want to do that? Really, you want to establish a baseline. What is your company worth to you, and what do you think it would fetch on the market? It really helps you identify some of those key areas that we'll touch on throughout this presentation of areas of concern. What are the really key metrics and situations that we need to touch on? And then it also provides you the ability to time this exit. So are you an S Corp? Are you a C Corp? There's a lot of situations that you need to know the exact timing tax-wise on whether or not this is a good time. So I think originally starting off, doing a business valuation is the key first step. So Jeff, I'm going to turn it over to you for the next slide.
Yes, we have the next steps. We have broken into a variety of segments, and the first one is financial. And all these first few are all value drivers. As you all know, most acquisitions are made, and the purchase price is a function of a multiple of EBITDA. So make sure that you understand what your EBITDA trend is over the last 3 or 4 years. Make sure your gallons trend, same thing. What does that look like over the last 3 or 4 years? By customer type, by product if you have more than propane. Same with the margin. What does that margin trend look like? These trends are very important when you prepare the company for transition or for sale. You're going to show a 3 or 4 year trend, and maybe even some projection years beyond that. So it's very important to understand, have your head around all these value driver items. Another one is other recurring revenue. What's the trend there? What does that look like? Maybe it's delivery fees, maybe it's tank rental. How long have you been doing that? Is there an opportunity to increase those fees over time? And my favorite bullet here on this slide is really this last one. Does the structure of your P&L today help you understand what's really going on in your business? Most back office systems certainly have a variety of reports that you can use and run to keep an eye on the key metrics within the business. But is your P&L also structured that way? I strongly encourage you to, if it's not, to take the time and effort to make it so. So many times we see a P&L with just one sales line, for example. All the sales, whether it be parts sales, whether it be propane, distillates, all lumped into one sales revenue line. And then that's the same with the associated cost of goods sold. Very, very hard, obviously, for you to understand what's really going on. Where are the areas of opportunity? Where are the areas of concern? And you're going to want to know that at a glance, monthly, maybe daily, weekly, depending on the metric. But again, if you're, it's wonderful to have these reports available in your system to look at these things. But again, your P&L should also tell you the same story. You should be able to look at that and identify what's working, what's not. You're going to want to show that when you get the company ready for sale in your presentation packet. And so why not get that taken care of now? And you want the new buyer, especially if it's a generational transition, you certainly want them to be successful. You got to have those details in order to manage the metrics, the key metrics of the business.
Yeah, Jeff, I think that's a great point. We see this quite often with that one sales line, and it's just so much better if you can really break it out by product, by service offering, and show that gross profit per revenue sector in your business. I think that's really beneficial. And it may take some legwork up front to get everything structured, but I think you'll really see benefits being able to track all that monthly, daily, as Jeff was talking throughout the process. So the next steps to focus on when you're transitioning the operation and is your house in order is customers. And you really want to have a good grasp of where those customers are, what type of customers specifically. So do I have 50% residential, 20% ag, and 30% commercial? You really want to know that breakout. That helps you kind of know where your margin's happening, and will help the transition of the next generation or new owner know exactly where those gallons are coming from. Another key metric in customers is number of customers on automatic delivery. It's really beneficial to have a high concentration of those customers on automatic delivery because they're really sticky. Those customers are going to stick around and stay for a while. So that's a good metric to have, first of all, knowing whether or not they are, but then focusing on getting more on automatic delivery is a key there. Another thing to focus on is budget plan and number of customers on a budget plan. It's good for cash flow planning, but also it lets you know just where that customer base stacks up. Another big thing is customer concentration risk, excuse me. So do I have one customer that does 30% of my gallons? That can be risky to the next generation or new owner. If they lose that customer, you're going to lose 30% of your gallons potentially. So you want to know where your customer concentration is and really know those relationships. So knowing that top 10 to top 20 is a big issue. And then customer gains and losses, and do you track churn? We don't see this with the smaller guys, but bigger operations will actually track customer churn. So they don't see, I had 5,000 customers in 2021 and I have 5,100 customers in 2022. They will actually know the numbers of in and outs and not just that net number. So that's something good to track when you're keeping focused on your customers.
Yeah, let me add to that one, Barrett. That last bullet, it is very, very important. As Barrett said, not a lot of companies track that, but it's something that that a buyer is going to want to understand and want to know. They're going to want to know that customer churn. You know, sometimes the gallons, just looking at the gallons, as you know, doesn't tell the whole story. Gallons could be consistent, but there could be a lot of churn going on in the background. And it's not, you know, it's not just measuring or tracking tank sets and pickups, gains and losses. It's about the associated volume too. I mean, you really should track the estimated volume gained by those new customers and the actual volume lost by those customers. Have that breakdown by tank size and by customer type. Very important.
Absolutely.
Okay, the next section is next step is employees. Take a look at these following items here. The employee benefits and perks, if you have them, are they consistent among all employees? What do I mean by that? Again, so many times we see some one-offs, if you will. Someone moved and their commute is now a little bit further from the office, and so maybe you gave the person a gas card, or you gave them a stipend in their paycheck. Those things are real. I didn't make that up. And it's okay to do those things as an independent owner, but when it comes time to position the business for sale or transition, it'd be a good idea to clean those things up. You know, let's be consistent among how we treat all the employees. You make that, that's a hard item for the new buyer or the next generation it's a hard thing to hand off to them. It's just not fair for them to have that burden. Same thing with vacation. What's your vacation policy look like? Is it a written policy? Do you allow carryover from year to year? I'm not suggesting that if you do, you eliminate that. I'm just suggesting that you make sure you have it under control. Is there a written, okay, you're allowed to carry 5 days over year to year. That's fine, but make sure you have it documented and make sure you have it under control. Driver qualification files. Again, this could be in a safety and compliance slide, but we have it here under the employee tab. This is definitely a key item in the due diligence process during a transaction. The safety and compliance person for the buy side is certainly going to want to look at this, look at the DQ files. Is everything up to date? Equally as important, these DQ files should be their own file. Those items should not be mixed in with the regular personnel file. So ask yourself where that stands in your organization. Is everything I just said, is that what's going on, or do you need to spend some time to get those in order, get them separated, and so on? And the last one here for the moment is a sensitive one. Is your staffing right-sized? Again, I go back to the comments I made in the first bullet. Don't burden the new buyer or the new generation with excess personnel. Maybe you've kept somebody on that's really not very productive any longer. And I'm not saying don't be humanistic or don't be sensitive to those things, but it's an expense, obviously, and it makes your company look less profitable, which is all again how the purchase prices arrived is a multiple of EBITDA. So this is a good time to look at your staffing. Is it right size? And I know it's a sensitive subject right now with driver and technician shortages out there. So I'm not at all suggesting that you run thinner than you should for the size and scope of your business. Again, I'm talking about the one-offs, the things that you've allowed to linger over the years, and this is a good time to look at those items.
Absolutely, Jeff. And I'm just going to touch back on that staffing because I know everyone's kind of feeling those pain point right now. I think it's also good to think about kind of the contrarian view to what you just said, is having that staff in place and being able to serve those customers. Right now, it's all about having the right staff to perform your operations. And I think having that right size staff to be able to deliver those gallons and perform that service has been a real key. So having the correct number of employees is huge right now. So next topic we're going to touch on is propane tanks. This is a really key metric when we're talking about propane companies. And some of those key items that we're going to focus on, and what you should focus on for the next generation, is propane tank control and what percentage of company-owned tanks do I own. And having a high percentage of that is a real value add for the next generation. Another thing, do you have tank leases for the company-owned tanks in the field, and are they complete and are they signed by the customer? The other item, do you have those readily accessible and easy to access? Sometimes we'll see some propane retailers not have those in place. And we've thought of some various different ways to kind of focus on that. One thing that we've thought has worked actually pretty well is you send out a mailer to everyone saying, hey, please sign this propane tank agreement. And if you do and get it completed in 30 days, you'll have the opportunity to win a $500 gift card. And doing programs like that just to make sure everything's in order is actually really beneficial to that next generation or potential buyer. They're going to want to have all that stuff lined up. So it's good to get that stuff in order before you do that. And then finally, if you have DOT tanks, do you have that documentation and retesting, and when's it due? And back to that, is it readily accessible? So really, a lot of this is, can we put our hands on it quickly and easily? And where do you file that, and all that?
Very good. Okay, safety and compliance, again, part of the next steps here. Same story as the tank leases that Barrett just talked about. Regarding the gas checks, do you have them? Are they signed by both the technician and the customer? Can you put your fingers on them? Are they in a customer file along with everything else? Are they separate? Really kind of a personal preference there, but just, again, know where they are. When it comes to due diligence, a buyer is going to want to see at least a significant random sampling of those. The easier you can make it for them to go through those, the better off both parties will be. Have your employees had the appropriate CTEP training? When's the last time you've done a duty to warn mailing? And again, do you have proof? Can you show the letter that was provided that showed that those got mailed out and delivered? It's important to do that. I mean, a buyer's going to want to know when that happened the last time. If it's been quite some time, many buyers will do that as one of the first things that they do when they post closing. They will get one out there to the customer base. Do you have a written out of gas procedure? Do your CSRs know where it is? Is it taped to their screen, or is there maybe a little binder next to their phone? But make sure you have a written out of gas procedure. It's just the right thing to do for your CSRs, for your customers. And another example of something, it's all about, can you put your hands on this? Can you provide it? Get it ready, because the last item here is the fire safety analysis. Assuming you have propane storage of some sort, that's an example of a document that a buyer is going to want to see in due diligence.
Absolutely, and safety's so key in this industry. We know that, so it's a big sticking point in getting your house in order. Next thing we're going to touch on is vehicles, and real quick, I want to take a quick pause. I should have said this at the start, but if you guys have any questions throughout this presentation, please type them into the Q&A section. Should be towards the bottom of your screen, and we will answer those towards the end. So next thing we want to touch on is vehicles. What's the average age of your fleet, and what are the capital expenditures really annually for those vehicles? So having that newer age fleet can really make the wear and tear less expensive, but knowing how much you're going to have to spend to get a new bobtail, and knowing that it's taking a year, 2 years to order that bobtail, having a good feel on that is good to get it in order, and really working with that next generation or new owner to allow them to know where they're at. Is your fleet right sized? And what do we mean by right sized? Are you doing the appropriate amount of gallons per bobtail for your service area? So if maybe it's 400,000 gallons for residential and a little less for a more rural area, but knowing what your bobtail is doing, and is your fleet the right size for how many gallons you're doing per year. Another good thing, and this is touching on something that we talked on earlier, is do you have good maintenance and repair records? And I think a lot of times we'll see stuff expensed and not capitalized, but you could have a large truck repair, new engine that costs $20,000 that you expensed, but it's lumped into some one repair and maintenance line item in your P&L. We've actually seen some companies that go truck by truck and will say truck 10, truck 11, truck 12, and show each expense per truck. I think doing that detail actually really lets you focus on where did I spend the money and what did I put it on in each truck. Another thing that we've talked about a lot, this whole transition of operations, is can I get my hands on it quickly? And so where are the titles? Am I going to be able to find that? Are they readily accessible? And where are they? And then the final piece, are there any liens that are going to be resolved as part of a transfer of ownership? All that will need to be cleared up before any transition, whether to a next generation or to a new buyer, outside buyer.
Yeah, Barrett, let me jump back to the right sizing the fleet. Again, we see so many times the company will buy a new vehicle, and really at the end of it at the end of the process really doesn't it does not replacing anything. Nothing else left the fleet. Still kept the old truck, still register the old truck, still pay insurance on it, and those things. Try to be careful with that. A lot of companies have excess trucks in their fleets, and it costs you money. And again, like we said before, it's all about profitability. The purchase price is a function of a multiple of EBITDA, and you're just hurting yourself if you're not diligent about when it's time to replace a truck. Make sure the old one goes away. It's just good business, and again, it is going to help you in the long run.
Absolutely.
So I think that wraps up the next steps. The things to get your house in order. And those slides that we just went through, I mean, that list is not meant to be certainly all inclusive, but they are real examples of things that a buyer is going to want to learn about, review, study, ask you for, and all the above. So please, those lists are meaningful. They're worth putting some time into. If you need to organize things a little bit better on any one of those items, please take the time and effort to do so. It's important, and trust me, they will all those items will come up in the course of a transaction process. So shifting gears now to preparing your company for acquisition outside the family. There's a couple of key acquisition models. Most of you know, if not all of you know what they are, but we have them kind of spelled out here. A standalone, obviously that's a company acquiring a business or a family transition, and it's staying the same. It's in the same location. It's probably the same brand name. It's not going to change to the parent company name. Usually all the employees are retained. Maybe there's a key management member that stays on to run the business. Maybe it's a family member. Maybe or sometimes maybe the buyer will put their own GM in there. But that aside, this is a standalone is a situation where pretty much everything remains the same. I mean, maybe they'll ultimately change their operating system to be consistent with what the rest of the company is using. But basically, a standalone is exactly what it says. It stays pretty much the same as it was before. A fold-in and some other, depending on the area of the country you're in, a tuck-in, a bolt-on. There's a couple of different phrases used here, but usually these operations are combined with the buyer's operations. It's usually pretty quickly after the acquisition occurs, because those synergies, economies of scale, have kind of been baked in, if you will, to the model that the buyer has come up with to arrive at the purchase price. And it's pretty important for the buyer to get those fold-in economics underway pretty quickly, without being insensitive to customer and employees and so on. In these situations, usually the physical location of the business does not remain intact. Sometimes it does. Sometimes there's a skeleton staff left at the old location, especially if there's been some traditional walk-in traffic from customers and so on. Again, that was more of a pre-COVID scenario, but still, sometimes it's important for strategic reasons, for marketing reasons, to leave the location in place. But it probably won't look like it does today. It will be some fraction of what it was before the acquisition. Some of the employees may or may not be part of the newly consolidated operation as well. As you can imagine, again, this is a fold-in, it's a tuck-in. There will be some tasks like maybe accounts payable, maybe collections, certainly accounting, HR, that will probably be done at a regional level, a corporate level, that or the larger location nearby in that market. And some of those folks just may not transition over. It's just a fact of that type of transaction.
So doing one or the other, there's some opportunities and risk involved with both of these. Touching on standalone, first off, there's some good opportunities there, and it really depends on your product offering. I think also we'll consider a standalone sometimes a platform company. So maybe this is a opportunity for you to break into a new marketplace. Maybe it's 60 miles from your regular location and you're going to branch into a new service area. So it's an opportunity there to gain new customers. It could also be the opportunity to diversify into a new product line. Maybe it's cylinder exchange, barbecue sales, fireplace inserts. Maybe you don't focus on that and this new company has that as well. So I think that diversification can be an opportunity as well. A risk involved with a standalone is all those things that Jeff touched on. We're going to operate it similar, keep the same name, but how do we merge those opportunities? Different back office systems can be tricky to manage too. Having the two names and focusing your marketing different can be difficult to manage as well. So really having a good plan for how you're going to operate that standalone operation is good and key when you're going for that opportunity. For a fold-in, some of the risks are it can be high attrition. When you're folding it into your operation, maybe the current customer was not part of your customer base and there was a reason for that, whatever it is. There could be high customer attrition if not done properly. So it's really important to think about this. How are we going to present this in a good, thoughtful way to keep the customer happy in the future? One of the benefits, though, that Jeff touched on for a fold-in are really it's the synergies, the cost savings that are involved. So if you're not going to use the location, you save on that rent payment, the utilities, property tax, maintenance, the CapEx, and the wear and tear on the facility. All that will go away because it'll all be rolled in. Staffing, some roles are a little easier. If you go from 5,000 customers and gain 6,000 or 1,000 and go to 6,000, it will be pretty easy to continue for the dispatcher to gain those new accounts and operate the same. Same for accounting. And HR, it's not as difficult when you're just adding to a already in place system, just adding a few more people. There's bigger undertakings would probably not be a fold-in. The fold-ins are usually sort of those smaller operations that you can tuck right in to your existing operation, and that's really where the synergies and benefits come with a fold-in. Any more to touch on there, Jeff, with the benefits?
I don't think so. I think we're good on the standalone versus fold-in. Okay, here's more of a checklist, if you will. These just some examples, again, not meant to be all inclusive, but some examples of some of the things that will need to be dealt with when you're transitioning the company. Items and tasks to be transferred, under the employee category. We've got the health insurance changeover. Obviously, the employee bullet here is not first by accident, but this is probably the most sensitive situation is dealing with the employees, making sure that they are comfortable as can be. It's a very stressful time for them. So you want to have careful thought to the changeover of health insurance, and both parties can work on this together. This isn't something that's the seller is responsible for solely or the buyer is responsible for solely. That's usually a discussion and a very delicately orchestrated changeover, so that the employees are not have no lapse of service, and that can be explained very, very well on closing day. And other employee benefit changes as well. Have that all detailed out. It's not just about health insurance, but it's about the vacation that we talked about earlier, and other benefits that employees might have. Again, some very obvious here, but it's got to be on a checklist, right? Under vehicles, we've got the titles, tags, registration. That's all got to be done. It's a very, very cumbersome part of the process, but it's a necessary evil. New DOT number, possibly, if it's not staying within the family, or maybe even if it is a generational change, maybe there's legally the name is changed. Maybe the operating name stays the same, but maybe the legal name changes, and that may or may not force a new DOT number. But oftentimes, obviously, the buyer outside of the family will have their DOT number that will need to be replaced on each of the vehicles, as well as owned and operated by will likely be there. And other required license numbers. Many states in the HVAC world, there's a contractor's number assigned by the state, and those numbers may have to be changed out as well. So anything that's identifying any required identification that needs to be on the vehicles, that's all part of the changeover that needs to happen.
Yeah, absolutely. And one thing that recently came to mind actually on vehicles is knowing those state regulations. Every state is a little different. So knowing state by state, if this transition is to an outside party, knowing how they're going to deal with it. If
Right.
they're operating in Connecticut, but acquiring a company in New York, every state's got different rules. So knowing those rules and having all that in place before the actual acquisition or transition takes place is key as well.
Exactly.
Some more items, tasks, like Jeff said, these are more checklists, and I'm going to run through these pretty quick. We'll send out this presentation after the fact so everyone can look at these. But more assumed liabilities, you're going to want to know the service contracts that are remaining on closing date. So if it was 10/31, where are we at in the year, and what piece of the service contracts have been fulfilled and what's still remaining? Knowing that exact amount is key. Price protection and hedges, that's big right now with the crazy fluctuations in the market, but knowing what you have in place for price protected programs and those future contracts, where are we at with those? Then the remaining piece here is accounts receivable, credit balances, and where are those at, and how are those going to be taken care of? Sometimes we will see those actually purchased at a discounted scale, so there's tiers that different parties present it differently, but maybe 95% for the current, and then tiered down 95, 80, 60% based on those aging reports. The other is collect and remit. We'll see that for 90 to 120 days, where the new acquirer will just collect and remit those accounts receivable to the new or to the previous owner. Other key items to focus on, like Jeff said, this is a checklist, but vendor contracts. So product supply contracts are very important. Where are you at, and where are those going to be for the next 6 months to a year? Those can go very far out. Software, that can be big. Sometimes those are long-term contracts, and are those assignable or are they not? And having that all in place. your credit card merchant, and giving them lead time to make sure they're prepared for this transition. Some other things on this is uniforms, posted machines, websites, silly things like your QuickBooks. A lot of stuff's going to have to transfer over, and making sure you know all those different vendors that you use is going to be key as well.
Yeah, one other item I wanted to mention there, Barrett, is leases too. We could have put leases on there. What triggered that was Barrett mentioned are some of these contracts assignable. Also take a look at your leases. If you have any leased property that you're leasing from a third party, not only are those leases, are they assignable? Again, know that they are or they are not. And is there right of first refusal language in that lease as well? Again, if you haven't looked at it for quite a few years, just make sure you understand what's in there, and be prepared to deal with it accordingly.
Absolutely, great.
So again, just wrapping up, the post-closing items. We just wanted to list these. Barrett already touched on the AR, but these three items are we usually see these above and beyond the purchase price, handled as part of the working capital settlement post-closing. Not every single time. Sometimes these items are included in the purchase price that was offered, but usually fuel inventory, parts inventory, and an AR are handled in addition to, on top of, outside of the core purchase price. Just wanted to make that point.
Absolutely. So finally, we're going to touch on our last topic here, and it's preparing for the merging of the two cultures. Whether you're going to the next generation or to a outside buyer, merging the two cultures is key. Keeping those customers and keeping those employees is going to be a huge, that's what these businesses run on. So with that said, usually similarities or the real right fit and feel is what's going to make that selection happen, whether it's to the next generation or to a new strategic buyer. We'll see a lot of times that's not always the top financial buyer, but it's really that fit and feel, and who's going to do best by my customers, who's going to do best by my employees. And that's a huge thing to consider when you're trying to put together a successful transaction. So what's the big thing right now is employee retention, and how do we attack that and really focus on keeping those employees? We were just at a conference a few weeks back, and there was a whole 3-hour session basically on employee retention. What are different people doing to recruit new people and keep those new people in place? So I think one big thing when you make this transition is explaining why did this happen and why was the seller choosing this particular buyer. I think being clear and saying that we went through a full process, we checked all the boxes, this is why we chose this person, is really big for those employees. Then a big thank you. Obviously, we can't do this work without the employees, so a big thank you for their hard work and dedication is huge here. That makes them feel good about themselves. It also makes them feel good about the new company. When you do all this together, it can really present it well in a good light. The honor employee time and title is really touching on, if that employee started in 2002, we're going to say they still started in 2002 with the new company, and honor all that previous work. So they're not going to start day one and it's a new employee 20 years after the fact when they've been working the company. Usually with a outside party acquiring the company, there'll be better growth opportunities. So they could be a district manager or regional manager. And if you're that platform company that we discussed earlier, there could be some real growth opportunities for these employees, and kind of explaining that out and saying, this is where you could be in 5 years with this new opportunity is really beneficial. And then really present all the new benefits and perks. Bigger companies have more employees, they're able to get better benefits, better perks. They can do flexible working schedules, education reimbursement programs, and volunteer programs. And usually with more hands involved, you can really lean into those opportunities. So presenting that and letting everyone know that this is this is a good thing for the next generation, for your work career, is really beneficial.
Yeah, we could have had 10 different topics here under this merging of the two cultures, but we tried to think of the ones that are really important to the employee and the customer, and safety is another one. Not, setting the message on day one that safety is a priority it just goes a long way with the employees. They want to hear that the new culture cares, or not that the old culture didn't care. Maybe the language here is we still care, and we're going to add this and that. For example, maybe there's not a safety committee now, or so there's an opportunity possibly to have an employee participate, these new employees participate on the safety committee. Maybe there wasn't kind of a safety day celebration in the past where the company takes half a day and sets up some driving rodeos, and I've seen all kinds of great safety day agendas held throughout at least the eastern half of the United States that I've spent most of my career in. And you can do some wonderful things around the theme of safety and really get good participation and good company morale. And again, if those things are happening, then be clear that they're going to continue to happen. We're going to further enhance them. And if they're not happening today, it's a great opportunity for the new buyer to introduce some things that the employees can look forward to. So again, all about the employees.
Yeah, it sounds a little silly when you say it, but it's key, and having fun is sometimes just part of that retention plan that you don't think about.
Absolutely.
So fine, I touched on this a little. I jumped ahead of myself, but communicating the details is huge. Letting the employees know that you checked all the boxes, you really did your due diligence. These processes can take 6 months, and you went through a lot of work choosing this new buyer or even the next generation. So carefully explaining that, really giving them all those details on why you did that is huge. We've got here adding maybe a quick FAQ document on frequently asked questions. Those can be a little BSy, but they can also really present a great opportunity to say, hey, this question was asked and here's how we answered it. They could be real questions too. How are benefits going to be handled? A lot of things that we touched on in a few slides back. Then some other things are, will the company keep the same name? These are all good questions that employees are going to want to know. Do we answer the phone the same way? Is there a new system? Will there be a letter sent out to customers or not? Will my job be the same? And that's a huge thing to communicate with the employees is, what's my day-to-day going to happen? Am I still going to drive in and sit at the same desk? And how do you communicate that is huge with the employees, and getting out in front of that is absolutely key to employee retention, but keeping that culture positive and beneficial overall. Anything else to touch on there, Jeff?
No, I guess the one thing I'd say is just to emphasize the importance of an FAQ document. Something, again, always good to be able to hand something to the employees. They can take it home. Their spouse or significant other might have some questions. Hey, what happened today? How did it go? It's just another document to help with everybody feel comfortable in the family.
Absolutely. All right, so we did pretty well on timing. It's 11:46. So at this point, if you have any questions, feel free to type them into the Q&A piece.
Why don't I start with a question, guys? I don't see any yet, but while you're answering, if folks have questions, please type them in. I will say communication to current employees absolutely is very important, even if it's a family transition. So my question relates to valuation, and I'd never thought about this before until just hearing you guys talk about it. And I'm looking at standalone versus tuck-in, and more traditionally, right, a family, family member to family member transaction, you still need that valuation, tends to be standalone. Selling to a larger company could be either. But I'm wondering, is there a difference in the actual valuation depending on what type of transaction there is? So obviously, if you do a tuck-in, there are going to be some economies of scale. But let's just say I'm of a certain generation and I've planned for the last 3 decades to give it to my daughter or son and do a formal transaction where they take over the business. But at the same time, maybe they're interested, maybe they're not. I want to see what I can get on the market for it. Is there a difference in valuation if you're looking to transfer it to the next generation in your family versus selling it outside the business, because you would know that there will be economies of scale? So how does that work if I'm trying to look at both at the same time?
Yeah, that's a great question, Steve. I can grab this at the start, Jeff, and jump in with any comments. Really, the multiple is the same. And what are we paying on? It's a cash flow, that EBITDA number. And so when you have those economies of scales, you're not going to have that rent, utilities. Maybe your insurance is lighter. Your employee benefits might get better when you lump everything together. So what happens is the operating expenses become less and that cash flow number goes up. So I might pay 8 times for a propane company, whether it's $800,000 or $500,000 EBITDA versus $1 million is where that difference comes in valuation. And what operating expenses am I going to save on? So I don't think the multiple per se would change because the metrics are going to be the same. What drove that? Propane tank control, margin, customer concentration risk, all those factor into that multiple. But then what's the cash flow being paid for that business is really the key there. So that's where the valuation would actually come in differently.
Great. Thanks, Barrett. I appreciate that. It looks like we got a question in the box. Oh, this is just going right at it. Patrick McCarty, if a company meets all the topics just discussed, what is the current multiple of EBITDA that can be expected?
Yep. So jumping into that, there's a lot of metrics that hit EBITDA, and we'll hear some people say, I got 10 times for my business. And what EBITDA is that? We like to think of things on an adjusted EBITDA basis. And so we kind of think of it as 3 different EBITDAs. There's the owner EBITDA, which is basically your net income minus depreciation, amortization, interest, and the EBITDA items. There's adjusted EBITDA, which is taking out like owner expenses is a big key there. We have a good slide that we didn't put in this deck, but it really shows the differences of what am I putting in and what do I need to take out to sort of normalize that EBITDA. And then finally, there's that buyer's EBITDA where they're going to be able to put in their synergies and what do we pay for insurance? What do we pay for product, and get that right number. I think in general, it is fair to say that on an adjusted EBITDA basis, with every market's different, and we know that every part of the country is a little different, but we kind of like to think of 7 to 9 times for a propane company is that adjusted EBITDA multiple right now. And we're seeing that hold up in the marketplace. And any comments there, Jeff?
Just to say that, you've already said every scenario is a little bit different. It'll depend who the buyer audience is. Obviously, there may be 4 or 5 offers in that range Barrett just said, and then there might be someone outside the market if the company is of the size and scope that it qualifies being an anchor store, if you will, or for a company that's outside of the market currently, they might be wanting to and willing to pay up even beyond that. So it really depends on the scenario and who the players are. Where are you? What's the demographic?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
What's your margin?
Yeah.
Let
me ask a follow-up. We have another question, but before we get to it, let me ask a follow-up question on that because I'm curious. Does that multiple swing up or down in general if it's not a pure propane retail business, if there's a distillate business or a fuel oil business, etc. Do you typically see trends for businesses that have multiple fuels versus propane only?
Yes, we do. And those other fuels will trade a little lower. So finding that blended mix is kind of the key component to these offers. So are you a 50-50 company where I do 50% of my propane or 50% of my gallons of propane, 50% are distillate? Finding that right mix, really it's based on the gross profit. Propane tends to be more profitable. So where is that hitting the income statement? And that's kind of how you get to that blended EBITDA multiple.
Okay. Looks like we have a couple other questions, so let's jump to those in the interest of time. So from an anonymous chat boxer, what is better in general, sell to a third party or sell to your family? I know it would be better with my family, but no, I'm going to leave that. What do you guys think?
Jeff, you wanted to grab that first?
What's better?
Define better, I guess, is the question.
I mean, I guess I'll answer it based on the scenarios that I've been involved in. I think sometimes there is another generation to pass it on to, and collectively the family elects to, in an effort to preserve value, to sell it to a strategic buyer, and have the generation that wants to stay on, and that's part of the sale. So I've seen that. It really depends on where the family's head is at collectively, and what's going on in the market around them. What do they think is the best way to preserve value? Is it through the next generation having all kinds of energy and opportunity that hasn't been taken advantage of? Or if that doesn't exist, maybe the right move is what I just said previously, is to preserve value. Let's sell it to someone, but I still love this business and I want to stay on.
Yeah, really tricky question, honestly, because I think every situation is different. So it's hard to nail that down. But Jeff, you nailed that on the head.
Yeah. Okay. So we're getting a bunch more questions. This is great. This is great chat. So next question I see is, okay, another very pretty specific question. Oil company multiple in New England. Assume the oil company is 90% auto delivery.
Go ahead, Barrett.
I'm gonna have to jump on that grenade. It's tricky. I mean, every business is different. It's hard to say something based on one metric there. What's your margin? How old are your tank wagons? Are they new age? Are they old age? Where are you located? New England's a big place. Are you in a really strong market, or are you in a really kind of lower margin market? It's tricky to say there. But I guess quick note is we kind of think of heating oil companies trading anywhere from 3 to 4 times, but that really can vary based on a lot of different factors, and it can be less based on if you're weaker in some of those categories, and it can be quite a bit stronger. We've seen some very strong multiples as well on some of the really A+ companies, I guess.
Yeah. And Barrett and Jeff, I know we're getting into the weeds with specific valuation questions. I assume that anyone on the webinar can contact you guys for a free consultation type of right. thing to drill down on some particulars of their companies.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. We do a quick and easy range of value, actually, and it's 10 questions. We do a confidentiality agreement, and then we can kind of nail down a rough range of value for you pretty quick and pretty painlessly.
Yeah. And so it looks like the last question we have here, I might take this one. I'm not even a panelist, but how long do we all have with the current mindset of meaning electrification? Look, I mean, that is NPGA's bread and butter. That is what we do every day, is to keep the market stable. And, as the House of Representatives most likely changes in a couple of weeks with the election, as administrations change, as the wind blows. Look, is the market going to differ as time goes on? Absolutely. Are you going to have to be nimble? And so if you are transitioning to, let's just say, a family-owned company, might you have to be nimble in terms of what your product is, or what your mechanism is, or what your outlook is, or what the usage is? I think so. So for example, I like to say, you know, if you look 30 years ago, there were a lot of businesses that were fuel oil only. And now what do they start delivering? Propane. Why? Because propane is cleaner. Propane has this advantage and that advantage. So if you're nimble, good. Also, let's look at usages. Are there certain municipalities that are trying to ban gas? Of course. Typically, they tend to be in urban areas where we don't have a lot of home heating, but that doesn't mean certain states aren't trying to pick that up. Will there be carve-outs? Yes. But on the flip side, will there be new uses for propane? Is there going to be better power generations and things like that, combined heat and power, microgrids, things of that nature coming down the pike? I think so. So I tend to be the most pessimistic person in the crowd. It's kind of my job to be, but that is absolutely a vital question, especially if you are selling to your child with the expectation that it's going to provide for their family, which is also your family. When we're in person in Nashville, we really drilled down on this question. It's like, I want to sell it to my children, but I want to make sure my children have a future. Personally, I think that there is a future in this business, but that's a very personal question that you have to undertake, and really that's a family question. That's less of a business valuation and more of a family dinner, Sunday dinner conversation first. So I do think you have to have those conversations. And if you're third generation, fourth generation, maybe your parents were having similar conversations as well, and it was just slightly different, but there's always going to be headwinds. So I'll stop there, but that's certainly something to take into mind. Okay, it looks like that was the last question. Go ahead, Barrett. Yeah.
It just doesn't make economic sense for everything to switch over in 10 years. I think it's nice pie in the sky, rosy stuff. I live in Washington, D.C. too with Steve, and we hear a lot of the crazy noise, but I don't think people always think through the whole problem. And I think if you have a good positive mindset, I really don't think this industry is going anywhere anytime soon.
Yeah, and I'll just follow up on that. Again, as long as the next generation has the mindset that the business will not be in 20 years what it was 20 years ago. It just isn't. No business is. It's just about being able to adapt, right? The one thing propane has is we have your retailers, your companies have the infrastructure, the over-the-road last mile infrastructure in place that no other industry has. So if you look at it from that mindset, I would just take that into consideration. So with that, we're at the top of the hour or the bottom of the hour, depending on how you look at it. I want to say a huge thanks to Jeff and Barrett and Cetane for this session. It's been absolutely terrific. The next session is, I believe, did Christine just put it in? Someone just put it in the chat box somewhere, but it is November 30th, I believe, also at 11 a.m. And we look forward to seeing people there. And thank you again, Jeff and Barrett, and we'll talk to you all soon.
Thanks, Steve.
Yeah, thanks for having us, everyone. A real pleasure doing this.